This episode is brought to you by Neurocrine Biosciences. Thank you, Neurocrine, for helping NADF continue to educate, bring about awareness, and save lives. Welcome to All Things Adrenal. Each episode, we'll hear stories from individuals living with adrenal disease, share updates on treatments, research, protocols, interview medical professionals, and explore all things adrenal together. I'm your host, Vanessa O'Rourke, NADF Community Engagement Manager and fellow adrenal warrior. Today, we are joined by AJ Connor. AJ was diagnosed with Addison's disease in 2015 during his sophomore year of high school. He's a graduate of Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he earned both his registered nurse credential and a degree in biomedical engineering. Over the past year and a half, AJ has worked as a clinical application specialist with ASCC, combining his clinical and technical expertise to optimize hospital workflows and enhance patient care. In addition, he serves as a registered nurse on the orthopedic floor at UPMC Shadyside Hospital. AJ discovered NADF while searching for others with similar experiences and continues to use it as a valuable resource for navigating life with Addison's disease. With that, I'd like to welcome AJ.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to go through all this with you and share my story.
I am thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for being here. You and I have been in contact over the years in a couple different ways, and we'll talk more about all those avenues too as we go through. And some people might recognize your name or your voice if they attended our conference in October, where you shared an educational video on how to give an emergency injection. Anyway, I've just been very excited to have you on and thrilled that today is the day. So with that, maybe you can just take us back in time and share a little bit about your diagnosis journey and tell us, I know it was back in sophomore year. So again, this is another high school story that we've heard a couple people's experiences, but if you could share with us what that looked like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you'd mentioned, I was diagnosed back in 2015. I was 15 years old, freshly a teenager, basically. I'm now 26 years old. So I've had this for over a decade, navigating all the different avenues between all of high school, college, and now post-grad life. So back when I was a sophomore in high school, I was very involved in sports. I still, work out, do the whole athletic regimen as much as I can. So I was a very big basketball player at the time. I should say I played football, basketball, baseball in high school. Never had any issues in terms of my health. It was always go, go, go and don't stop. And school was also very important in my life as well. So being able to balance all of that as, a typical high schooler, as well as a social life at that time. So I started to kind of find my symptoms at the beginning half of my sophomore year. I was in practicing for football, actually. We were doing some sprints. I was a very scrawny 14, 15-year-old, maybe weighed 100 pounds, So I was very much in shape at that time until we started to do some drills towards the end of the football season, and I noticed I wasn't keeping up with everyone else. I was falling below my norm, and I kind of felt something was off, right? But I chalked that up to a long season. Kind of was waiting for basketball season. That was my sport, and didn't really think anything of it until I started going to school and seeing the same sort of tendencies. I would days off in class, or it might have been the beginning of the day, and I was so tired, like otherworldly tired. Again, kind of some typical things like a normal teenager. You chalk it up to, oh, they're being lazy or whatever it might be. That was kind of what it was. I thought it was. My parents thought it was at the time. Kind of ignored it for a little bit until it kind of really went into overdrive. I remember getting sick towards that last week of football season and starting basketball conditioning, and really, really not feeling like this was just a common cold or flu or, whatever it might be. Just not feeling very good at all. So kind of got over that. That cycle kept happening where I would get sick. I, again, was really, really tired at that point in time. I wanted to essentially quit basketball, which was really the love of my life at that point. My life revolved around basketball at that time. So as you can imagine, my parents, their alarms were raised at that point, seeing their kid not like doing the thing that he loves to do the most at that time. My grades started to slip because I couldn't focus during a test or class. And it just seemed like everything was going downhill for me to where that hadn't happened before. I then continued to get sick. I ended up quitting the basketball team because I was, so sick and didn't feel like, doing that anymore. And once I did that, my mom was like, okay, we need to get you seen again. Although I'd been to the doctors multiple times before that. It was chalked up to recent mono, a cold, again, maybe lazy teenager, at that time. But, mother's intuition really helped save me. At that point, my mom took me up to UPMC Children's here in Pittsburgh, where I met and thankfully met and got taken care of by probably one of the smartest ER nurses in the country. She immediately looked at me and knew something wasn't quite right. It wasn't exactly mono. It wasn't anything that they could pinpoint. They gave me some fluids and they let me go. But a few days later, they called me back because they wanted to run some more tests on me. So that was the first that I had heard of Addison's disease. That's exactly what they wanted to test me for. They wanted to do the ACTH test, bring me back in. So I went straight to the endocrinologist there. About a day or two later, they ran the test, and sure enough, that's what I was diagnosed with. So my world kind of opened up at that point. And again, as a 15-year-old, you don't really realize it. I didn't really realize it. Heck, for many, many months, maybe even years later, really the magnitude of my condition. Once I started taking my hydrocortisone dosage, it helped tremendously. I went back to the basketball team, played an entire season of basketball, got back on my honors courses, and the rest is history from there. So everything's pretty well controlled now, and just navigating it one day at a time.
There's so many things that I want to go back on and comment about. But first, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm sorry you had to endure all that. But while I'm thinking of this thought, it's so, I want to say it's crazy. It's not crazy because I hear this all the time. I also experienced it. You experienced it. You've shared it. I've heard it from so many patients, but it's so crazy that we go through fatigue or pain, or we basically essentially, we don't feel well, yet we still second guess ourselves and compare ourselves to other, well, I'm tired, or I'm a lazy teenager, whatever it is. It's so crazy that we can, and I think that goes to, we don't know what other people are feeling. So we assume other people are feeling similarly to our experience, I think. You're reminding me of like when I was in high school, I was severely tired, wasn't full-blown Addison's yet, obviously didn't know till much later in my life. But I remember I would fall asleep in every single one of my classes. My teachers would shame me. I couldn't stay awake. No matter how much sleep I got, I could not stay awake during classes. And everybody just assumed it's like, you're a tired teenager. That's very normal. So I want to validate your experience, but also tell other teens and other parents or caregivers, like, pay attention to those things because it does get easily swept under the table. But I think your story of you chose and or wanted to give up basketball, the thing that you loved, and that was an indicator to your family that like he wouldn't step down on this unless he had to. So maybe I'm saying to other parents and caregivers, like, look out for those things because that's pretty telling when a teen doesn't want to do the thing that their whole world is about.
I completely agree with that. I mean, that was probably the one thing that really set it over the edge for me, and to kind of expand upon that, I think as a high schooler and, I had mentioned before, even in college, I don't think that I realized the magnitude of what I had because even life after that, right, it was still so go, go, go. It was back into sports, back into school, college, social life, as I was mentioning. So I didn't really, I guess, have time to reflect on it too much now, as much as I do now post grad. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that, I'd want to stress for people who might feel that way now. To Vanessa, to your point, it's like, for all those years, you look at other people and you think, well, this person can do this, or I'm being told I'm lazy, or something like that. I think that's a pretty universal thing with people that have Addison's disease or any adrenal insufficiency, secondary insufficiency as well, is that, oh, you chalk it up to, oh, that person's lazy, right? So I think just, obviously advocating for what you have, letting people know that you have, primary, secondary adrenal insufficiency, whatever it may be. And just allowing, my biggest thing, I guess, message for other people would be allowing people that grace, an understanding of, hey, today might not be my best day. And it's not because I don't want it to be my best day. It might not be able to be, so I think that's the biggest thing that I've had to come to terms with and be able to advocate for is that, hey, I'm going to give everything that I can every single day, but just, work with me in the sense of, I have what I have. I manage it every day. I get up out of bed every day. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's one day at a time. So
I couldn't agree more. And I think, you said great. Words are hard right now. You said that people should give other people grace, but I think you may have also said this, and I'm just brain fog messing it, that we need to give ourselves grace too,
yes.
Because I think that's hard to remember. And when we are low cortisol, we don't think that we're low cortisol. And so we don't realize that's why we're having a harder time with things. So that is huge. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that. We've talked about, we mentioned you're in the medical field, and you had this particular incredible nurse that essentially saved your life in tandem with your mom. Did that kind of play a role? Like, did your diagnosis play a role in your interest in getting involved with the medical field? Or how did you really decide that that's the avenue you wanted to take?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's I have a lot of family that's in the healthcare field. My mom's a pharmacist. I have nurses and physical therapists, all that good stuff. I always thought that's the way that I wanted to go, but this kind of really set it over the edge for me. You see that diligence, you see that care, you see people at their lowest points, in life and not feeling well, and you get to be some part of that, whether it's just getting them water during the course of your day or talking to them about life. That's something that I always appreciated as I was going through what I was going through. So just the chance to be able to give back to that as well. I actually started out my nursing career on the endocrinology unit at Children's. So, I thought that's really, what I wanted to do and give back to people who have similar conditions as me, especially as a kid. I've since transitioned from that, but it's has fulfilled a part of me that was given to me. And that setting that example of, you never know what someone's going through during the course of their day, and just being able to be there for them on their worst day.
I'm so glad that the path led you to where you are, because I'm a visual person, and I always like to think about the ripple effect of, dropping the pebble into the pond, and, it may just be one tiny stone, but like the ripples that it makes across the pond, you going through your medical journey and then receiving this diagnosis and then shifting your attention to helping others. Now, how many people have you, and will you, in the grand scheme of things, will you help save, support through your medical field? So it's incredible, for a lack of a better word, for where you are. And I'm so glad that you are doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's given me a career. It's given me a lot to give back to my community, and just very happy with with the field that I picked. So.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, because I want to talk about some things, because you have the perspective of a patient. You're a patient with adrenal insufficiency, but you are also in the medical field. So you have a medical perspective. So I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about, what does that look like? How is it different? Especially from an advocacy standpoint. Advocacy is a huge word that's thrown around justifiably in our community, because adrenal insufficiency and adrenal disease in general is so under researched or understood by a lot of people and medical professionals. So as a patient, for someone who's not working in the medical field, does advocacy look different for them versus for you as someone who's like, what do you see? Do you see a difference? Is there the same thing happening? What does it look like?
So, I'll be honest with you. I think for adrenal insufficiency in particular, I think it does look the same. I think that, being in the medical field, you're going to know the terminology a little better. You might understand the processes a little better, but at the end of the day, it's all about who you're talking to, like just being open and transparent. Is that provider open to hearing what you have to say, right? So, I think that's probably the biggest thing going in to look for, right? So if you're having a provider that, is kind of what we talked about earlier, right? Like, oh, you're just tired, right? Or, just kind of brushing off your symptoms. I think that's the biggest thing to look for in general. And, knowing, and this might be the big difference between someone in the medical field and not, right, is knowing that you have options in the hospital, right? You have patient advocate support. There are, actual people with that title that will come down and talk to you, that you can voice, hey, my provider, is not listening to the symptoms that, I'm having. Letting your nurse know, obviously, I think is the biggest thing. Whereas, providers, physicians, they might not be there with you 24/7. Your nurse is always going to be there at your bedside, right outside at the nurse's station, wherever it may be, as well. So voicing that to them, but always knowing that there's a patient advocate or a patient relations person within the hospital setting where you feel like you're not being heard. I think that's the biggest thing, right? I've even gone into I was in the emergency department last year. I had a stomach bug, obviously had to give myself the, injectable and all that good stuff. I have my mom who's, I know I mentioned it before, who's a pharmacist, a healthcare professional as well. There are times when, she feels like she's not being heard, right? So, I think that's the biggest thing to identify. The first thing that when you get in there is my provider listening to my symptoms, So I think that's probably the biggest thing. But other than that, I don't think that there's much of a difference between someone in the medical field and not right now with adrenal insufficiency.
Can I put you on the spot a little bit and ask you, from your perspective as a nurse, when you are treating a patient, if a patient, maybe not adrenal insufficiency, I'm just curious your gut reaction response in those situations. If a patient says, the doctor's not listening to me, or I want to speak to the patient advocate, is that received well?
So again, I feel like it depends on almost the person that is taking care of you, like, just to be open and transparent, right? I'm always open to, we need to get you the help that you need, wherever it may be. It might not be that specific physician. You might have a different specialty physician taking care of you as your primary, and you might need, someone else taking care of you, almost as a secondary or following up. I have people on my ortho floor who have maybe diabetes, or I have had someone with secondary adrenal insufficiency before. So stress dosing or extra doses of insulin, whatever it might be, to where we have to follow up with a different group. So I would say, as long as you voice that, it is going to go down the pipeline, right? In the hospital setting, it is going to get to where it needs to go, especially if you're involving a patient advocacy member or a caseworker, or whoever it might be.
I think that's so important for members and patients and individuals with chronic illness in general to hear, because I think sometimes we feel intimidated or scared, or we've had traumatic experiences in the past, so we don't always use our voice. So that's encouraging to hear that in your experience and in your environment that it is received well. So do you have coworkers in your circle, in your medical field, who have adrenal disease or chronic illness in general, like any other individuals on your team or vicinity?
So I do not directly, but I have heard stories of some individuals around Pittsburgh who do, and it kind of takes me back to what we were talking about earlier, with obviously advocating for yourself, and kind of letting it be known, like, hey, this is what I have. If I ever seem like I'm drifting, or, maybe not doing as much, or have to take a break here and there, this is why, right? So I actually know, I've heard a story of an individual who does have, I believe, secondary adrenal insufficiency, working as a nurse at one of the local hospitals. And it was kind of disheartening to hear, like, hey, my coworkers are kind of feeling like, I'm not doing as much, and I am, or if I'm calling out sick, like I'm calling out sick a lot just because of what I have, and what it was the winter, I have heard stories like that, and being able to talk to an individual like that and saying, hey, I understand you. I think that's the really, really, really nice part about the NADF, is connecting with individuals like myself and saying, I've gone through this as well. This is how I've navigated it, and just letting others know, point blank, this is what I have. Some people are going to understand that. Some people are not. Unfortunately, that's what I've come across in life. But, just letting them know that gives you some sort of sense of relief. At least it always gives me some sense of relief. Like, hey, this is what I have. And it's not so much as justifying it to another person as it is, I always like to say it, if anything were to go wrong, if I ever needed my emergency injectable or anything like that. So yeah, that's kind of what I've seen. I think at the end of the day, it's obviously just increasing awareness as much as we can each and every day.
Do you, or have you seen an increase in awareness in the medical field about adrenal disease?
Just where I have been at, just in the orthopedic space, I have not seen too much, although I know that there are some incredible people out there that are doing things with EMS, and getting certain guidelines for adrenal insufficiency out there. Emergency departments across the country, I know there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work with that. But, I think a lot of it too, again, comes from us, right? I have a really good support group around me that also kind of, voices that. I have a brother who's also a nurse that voices that all the time with patients who he might see with adrenal insufficiency, like, and advocates for that, and lets other staff members know, like, hey, this is what's going on with this patient. I see it with my brother. This is some of the symptoms that they might have. This is what they might experience. You really have to advocate them in terms of stressful times. So yeah, I do think it is growing in terms of the advocacy for it. It's just getting it out there as much as possible.
I think I agree. And I think it's a slow and steady climb, but obviously a worthwhile activity, or worthwhile of our spoons to spend the energy on advocating. So can we talk a little bit about stress?
Yeah.
I want to honor your time and energy, but also I think a lot of people would be very curious, because I don't want to generalize, but I think it's a pretty common understanding that working in a medical position is a potentially stressful environment. The things that you see, the things that you do on a day-to-day, how do you manage that as someone with adrenal insufficiency? How do you handle a stressful job in general, day-to-day?
Yeah. So, I think this has been said multiple times, but each day is different. And that is both in terms of being a nurse and then also in terms of having adrenal insufficiency, right? So I might wake up one day and, my body might really, really hurt. I don't really want to get up out of bed more than, the normal person might not, especially on those cold winter days, right? So I think that's challenge number one, is, when I wake up, how do I feel, right? Am I hurting? Am I extra tired? Do I maybe need to take an extra dose, especially on the days that I know I'm going to have a shift as a nurse? Now, I've since kind of gotten out of bedside nursing. I travel a lot, doing a lot of basically nurse consulting. But I do pick up as a nurse here and there. So if I know it's a long travel day, I might take an extra dose in the morning, right? I think it's a lot of listening to your body as soon as you wake up. During the course of the day, it's a lot of checking in with yourself. So I myself have alarms set at one being at 2:30, where it's more of, not only is that the time that I take my afternoon dose of hydrocortisone, but it's also the time that I step back and reflect. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm, I might be in a meeting or in the car or at a hospital, whatever it might be, it's my 2 seconds to step back, and say to myself, how am I feeling? Do I need an extra dose? Just really listening to your body at that point in time, because that's going to dictate at least the rest of my day, right? If I hold my dose off, if, maybe I should have stress dosed and I didn't, things like that. So it's taking those little 30 seconds to step back, say to yourself, how am I feeling? And then you go on with the rest of your day. Then you get to your nighttime dose. I get to my nighttime dose. I'm, hopefully home at that point. It's been a long day, whether I'm at the hospital as a nurse or if I'm consulting with hospital leadership. Whatever it is, again, you take that 30 seconds. How did my day just look? Do I need to take an extra dose? Thinking about tomorrow as well. How am I going to feel tomorrow, right? Or what do I have tomorrow? I think that's the biggest thing. Taking that little bit of time throughout the course of your day to look back and say to yourself, how do I feel? And I know we brought this up earlier as well, Vanessa. You made a really good point of, we tend to look at other people, just as human beings and say, wow, like, that person did this or that, that person did that. Especially in today's social media age, I'm 110% a victim of that. And I think a lot of that is kind of tuning that out as well and saying, I have adrenal insufficiency. My day isn't going to look like everyone else's day. And again, like I said earlier, I'm going to give everything that I have, but I'm also going to be mindful of of my body. Because if you give everything that you have, and a lot of us, know this who've had this for quite some time. If I give everything that I have and I ignore what my body's telling me, the next day is going to be pretty brutal. So just listening to yourself, listening to your body, embracing those around you, letting people around you help. I'm very much a person that I do not want any help. I typically want to do everything by myself, get everything done. But again, whenever you're doing that moment of self-reflection, it's, where can I ask for help? Letting people help. This person asked if, my significant other asked if, they could do anything to support me, right? Or clean the dishes, or, fold the clothes, or, just little things like that, right? That, might take a load off of your day. If you have that, accept that and kind of take that off your plate, and, it'll definitely help in the long run. So
I agree 100%. And I try to practice that as much as possible. Obviously, again, we do find ourselves in situations where we're comparing to other people, or we're getting frustrated with our limitations. I'm really glad that you brought that up again, because I think that is I know that's something I struggle with a lot, seeing what other people are doing and feeling sad that I can't do that, or, my past life, my past career and past hobbies, not being able to do them to the same caliber or at all. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also a good reminder that even amongst our community, like, adrenal insufficiency looks very different for other people. And like, you mm-hmm. sharing how you check in with yourself at each alarm and each dose is incredible. And I'm so glad that works for you. But I absolutely know me and the way that adrenal insufficiency impacts me. Sometimes stress is worse than sickness and pain for me. Mm-hmm. I know I would not thrive working in a hospital environment, and that is okay. That is not a gift that I have or a thing I'm going to do, but recognizing that even amongst our community, we all may have, the same organ compromised to some degree, but we also have other extenuating factors, other genes, other medical conditions, environments, support systems, or lack thereof. And all of those things are going to change the way that our body responds to the condition. So that's just a reminder to people, because I know a lot of people will be very inspired by the fact that you have such to me, it's a very intense grown-up job that scares me, but I'm so glad that you do it. But I'm so impressed by all that you do, and the caliber that which you hold yourself is very impressive and inspiring. But I also don't want people to be, to compare their limitations to you, because we all have different skill sets and bandwidths, really is the word I'm looking for. We all have very different bandwidths.
Yes, I'm the same way. It's not, sickness or whatever that really gets me. It's just overall stress that really, really affects my body from day to day. So just doing you and knowing we're all in this together, and that there are other people out there, obviously, really brings me peace day to day. I'll share this too, right? I was on vacation this past year. I live in Pennsylvania. It's not super. We might get 3 good months of summer where it's quote unquote warm, but I'm not really used to that really warm, humid temperatures every single day of the year, right? So we go down on vacation in Florida. It's very, very humid. And I'll catch myself getting really, really irritated. Not feeling like myself, and being able to take that step back, right? And that 30 seconds, like, okay, this isn't how I normally feel. It isn't my normal personality. What do I need to change, right? And, I stress dosed, I double dosed in that sense. And, I'm right back to where I need to be at. So Vanessa, you make a really good point. I live somewhere, and we're just talking about just climate environment, right? I live somewhere where it's not super, super warm all the time, right? So I'm not used to adjusting based on just the temperature it is outside. So for someone in Florida or Arizona, or where it is that all the time, that's something you constantly have to think about, right? So just being mindful of that from person to person, and again, stepping back, I think is really beneficial.
Well, and it's not just weather, it's
Yeah,
elevation gain.
right.
So you've got elevation causes issues. It's also barometric pressure. It's back and forth with weather. It's allergy season. So I feel like as someone, I have other chronic illnesses as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I live in Texas. So it is very hot all the time. And you'd think
Uh-huh.
after 10 years with Addison's that I'd have it stable and figured out. I don't. It's
Mm-hmm.
always a challenge. And so every day, is it allergies? Is it this chronic illness? Is it
Uh-huh.
this? Is it Addison's? Do I need to? No matter what it is, I always go back to, again, this visual, like Addison's is the captain of the ship. No matter what's happening to my
Mm-hmm.
body, I have to go back to the captain and be like, is this being impacted? I got to
Yeah.
updose to appropriately survive the day.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it is. It truly, truly is. It's so different for everyone, even adrenal insufficiency wise, outside of people that don't have adrenal insufficiency. So yeah, no, I think it's so unique. And I think that we're so fortunate to have an organization such as the NADF to kind of come together and bounce those symptoms and hey, what do you do for this? What do you see here? How do you manage this? I think it's awesome.
Well, and I also want to shout out, which I can't believe I haven't said it already, that AJ is actually our Pennsylvania support group leader. So NADF has support groups all across the country where most of them are virtual at this point, or groups meet, depending on the group every quarter, every month, or once a year, whatever it is. But AJ leads the Pennsylvania support group. So he is facilitating a space for individuals with adrenal disease to come together and connect, just like you were saying, sharing what works. And I think that's the benefit of having a support group in your actual physical community, because you're having the same environmental experiences and you share medical professionals because
Yes,
you're living in the same area, which is so helpful.
absolutely.
Okay. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to add as a registered nurse with adrenal insufficiency that we haven't already covered?
No, I think it's just, I think it's listen to your body, take that time to relax and do things for yourself. I've really gotten into things um, such as therapy and, really try to embrace that and, kind of alleviating that stress. So, that's kind of something that I've added to help, with everyday life, not even just being a nurse. So, that has really been a helpful avenue. Obviously, trying to find maybe a hobby or something to really kind of take your mind off of it. I know for those of you who might be post grad like myself, who was so used to the school regimen and again the social life regimen and all that really good stuff, and that really exciting time of life, and where it's transitioned to I'm now working full time, and I'm coming home and I might not have anything planned. Really trying to find that as well for yourself is super, super beneficial, whether that's exercising a little bit, going for a walk, whatever you're able to do is super beneficial to the diagnosis as well.
Yeah, I think taking care of yourself is such a valuable reminder because, again, that looks different for everyone too. For me, I turn my phone off. I go off social media.
Yes.
I unplug. I play Animal Crossing. I knit. Like, that's what it looks like for me, but
Yes.
it's going to look different for everyone. But however we need to rest and save our energy and recover is truly essential. So I'm so glad as a medical professional that you emphasize the importance of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just one last thing is, if anyone else is a nurse or any medical professional or anyone really, really focusing on and embracing, if you have time off, use it, really spend that time for yourself. And if your body's telling you, you can't do this today, that is fine. That is absolutely okay, and understanding that, and just knowing that there are other people out there that are going through the same, and yeah.
Yeah, we're not alone.
For sure. So,
well, thank you, AJ, so much for your time and for all that you've done for NADF. Continue to do. If anyone has any questions or would like to reach out about the support group, you can always reach out to NADF support at nadf.us, and we can connect you with AJ and the support group if you're in the Pennsylvania area. Thank you again, AJ. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Awesome, Vanessa. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Adrenal Warriors. I'm your host, Vanessa O'Rourke, sending you all the spoons, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining in on another episode of All Things Adrenal. This episode is edited and produced by Magdalene Zinke. For more information on the National Adrenal Diseases Foundation, please visit nadf.us. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review to help others find out about all things adrenal. If you have a story you want to share or a question you'd like answered, reach out to NADF support at nadf.us.